So you should see my slides by now.
Yes, it's visible.
And fine, good. So I'm going to talk today about interorganizational networks and how they form and how they are governed for joint project execution. So what I mean with that is that companies go together to run a project. Yeah, and the particular networks we are looking for in this setting is networks where companies repeatedly go together to run different projects over time. So the question here is how are they governed as a network? Yeah, not so much as a project, but as a network. How do we govern these companies in there? How do we decide which company goes in a network with project A and which companies go into a network with project B? Yeah, so that is more or less the question that drove us when we started this study. And the purpose of my presentation is a bit of a discussion of the nature of interorganizational network governance. Yeah, not so much its management, but its governance, yeah, of these types of repetitive networks for projects. Yeah, we will end up with a model of different governance layers and the different dimensions in this model, so that we know which parameters shall we influence when we want to optimize the governance of our networks. So we develop a framework of governance design options, using these layers of governance that we identify and the dimensions within each layer. That leads us to the agenda. What is it that I'm going to take you through in the next 45 minutes or so? I will start with a little bit of a reflection on the current discourse. I call it the network ecology. Yeah. So what do we mean by network? Yeah. Well, what are the basic thinkings in the world of interorganizational networks when it comes to projects? How do we distinguish between governance and management and these type of things? And then we will start at the nucleus, at the smallest entity of governance in this world, and that is the governance of a network for one project. And we call that network governance. Yeah, it's only one network that has to be governed for one project. But this network is in a network of further networks, yeah, and we will see what I mean with that. And this network of networks also requires governance. Now, how does that look in practice? Let's take a large project, yeah. Let's say the building of a school in a country. A recent publication by Andy Davis and Giuliano De Nicole showed us how these large projects are typically structured. Yeah, at the top we have an owner or a sponsor of a project, could be a government agency. Yeah, and reporting to that owner, we have a client organization. We often call that a special purpose vehicle. Yeah. Typically formed for the purpose of this project to control, let's say, the financial side of the undertaking. Reporting to this temporary client organization, we have a tier 1 supplier providing project management. Yeah, and this tier 1 supplier then contracts all the tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 types of supplier companies. Yeah, and we see already here there's a hierarchical part and there's a network part at the lower end. So in other words, if you look at an example here, a school building in a city in Scandinavia, yeah, we have the ministry as the owner. We have a steering group made up of the beneficiaries. And then we have project management as the tier 1 suppliers contracting the tier 2 suppliers. And from there, it goes into a network of smaller but very meshed suppliers in other companies that provide this information sharing network, but also the design of the tendering documents. Yeah, who does that? How to what extent do they allow yet unknown companies to get together and work together? And last not least, the balance between the four modes in order to reflect the situation that the investor is in. Good. Summing this up, we said we have three levels of governance: meta governance, governance of networks, and network governance. At the level of meta governance, we have meta exchange, organization, hierarchy, solidarity, and balancing as the five dimensions for governing from an investor perspective. That influences the governance of networks. Yeah, and here we form new networks, we structure them, we define the accountabilities, responsibilities, and the modes of collaboration, depending on what meta exchange, meta organization, hierarchy, solidarity tells us. Yeah, what does meta governance allow us to do at the governance of network level? Once we have the governance of network level build up, we then go into the individual project network, yeah, where we have type 1 and type 2 governance as the two governance approaches of the network, which are linked by clubs, agencies, and boards. Good. So we talked about inter-organization networks for projects and that they need different governance approaches to jointly execute projects or large mega projects over time. Talked about three governance layers: meta governance, shaping the context, giving the ground rules, typically done by the investor or even the government. Governance of networks, then forming and governing the networks that companies are in and their relations. And last not least, network governance, shaping governance, the individual network for the individual project.